means truth. So tell me about your spiritual journey.
What's going on? This is Lindsay Warwick, the conduit on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. This is the Tattva Tuesday interview series. I am so stoked to have my lovely friend Nikki on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I'm just so excited that you're here and it's aligning the way that, spirit wants it to align. So, for any first time listeners, the whole concept of the podcast is to talk about the spiritual journey and your conception of God and source and anything else that wants to flow through. This is a super intuitive podcast. I don't have anything prepared, usually ever. And I just kind of let the energy take over, and whatever is meant to come through is meant to come through. And I really have found success in that. And it is one raw take. I don't edit either. So yeah, I guess that being said, I met Nikki. When did I meet you? 2 years ago?
Yeah, about 2 years
Wow.
ago. I want to say it was August. It was summer in Appalachia
Yeah.
at Hawk and Hawthorne.
Yes. For the
Yes.
galactic New Year, the galactic celebration.
Yes. I
Oh,
was serving tea.
yeah. Yeah, and we ended up talking in the tea room for I don't even know, like hours. It felt like.
For so long. And then we got to go on a really beautiful hike. I think we went to Mount Mitchell.
Yes, we did.
Mhm.
So great. And the funny part, just like kind of how the alignment just happened with the podcast. So we were trying to jump on the podcast about 30 minutes ago, and we both had technical issues. And our original start time was, 1 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, we didn't end up getting on the podcast until then, which is similar to that Mount Mitchell experience, because I think I
Mm.
had told you, oh man, I tried to go to Mount Mitchell today, and my GPS had taken me this backwards way and I didn't get there in time. And then I had to get to Hawthorne, and I mentioned it and you were like, yeah, let's just go tomorrow. And I was like, that's so
Right.
awesome. And it was, yeah, super beautiful climate up there and just amazing energy. And I'm just grateful you're here.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's really beautiful to think back on that day at Mount Mitchell. It's coming back to me, and us just like being totally embodied in the soil and the
Mhm.
trees and
Yes.
the herbs of Appalachia. And just was like such a beautiful sister connection amidst, what I really view as God, which is nature.
Yes. Yes, it was awesome, and I highly recommend everybody and anybody to go up there. And I felt like the soil was so rich that I could like literally eat it, because it just was so, oh God, it was just so beautiful. The energy up there is incredible, and I highly recommend it to anybody. But so
Yeah.
I know some things about you. We've had some deep convos that have been amazing, but
Yeah.
I'm definitely curious about your spiritual journey, like how you kind of got to where you are, and there's no wrong way to explain it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, tell us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. What's coming through right now for me is thinking about when I was a child, and so my mother died when I was 5 years old of pineal gland cancer, and she came into religion kind of right when she became ill. And she had desired for me to be baptized and to go through these religious processes, which I don't necessarily connect with spirituality, but for a lot of people, that is their spirituality. And that didn't end up happening for me. But after she died, I was kind of told like, cancer is inevitable in the fact that it takes people, that you don't have control over it. There's no cure for cancer. And so I had this thought when I was little of, what if I found the cure to cancer? Or what if I one day discovered how to heal someone's chronic illness like cancer? And growing up, I was very much under the impression and influenced by the rhetoric that cancer is an inevitable thing. If the Western medical system can't treat it, then we don't really have a chance with it. And when I was in college in California, I really started to divulge onto my spiritual path, and I started to learn about natural medicine. And the big thing that came through for me at that time was learning about the cannabis plant, actually, and discovering that people had actually used the cannabis plant to heal their cancer and to heal and handle a lot of chronic conditions. And so that really opened up a lot for me and just made me realize that there are so many things that we don't talk about in the modern world in terms of ways to heal ourselves and take care of our bodies. And at that time I was exploring a lot of different things. I started to get into natural medicine. I started to get into herbs. I was reading a lot of beat literature about, people in the 50s just traveling the world and exploring psychedelics and just really living outside of the bounds of what we had been told was acceptable in our culture. And then, moving forward, a year or two after I had graduated undergrad, I was traveling in Japan, and lots of deep, beautiful spiritual occurrences happened in Japan, but my childhood cat was actually sick from a very rare form of cancer that was the same percentage of rarity as my mother's cancer.
Wow.
And
I just got chills.
yeah, it was really wild. And what was
Yeah.
even more wild is that they had the same birthday, April
What?
6th.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so, I had thoughts of like, I wonder if my mother has reincarnated into my cat, Pumpkin, even if she hasn't, it feels like she's here with me, and there's some intersection between the two. And at that point, my cat was really developed in terms of the stages of cancer that she was undergoing. And my family was looking to me for support in treating her naturally, but it had progressed so much that it was really hard to even get anything into her body. And so she passed while I was in Japan, and that was kind of my final notion of I need to study natural medicine seriously. I had been self-studying it for years. I had degrees in psychology and sociology, but I was like, I have to do this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to look into herbalism schools. And at the time, I was actually really wanting to move to New Orleans and was looking for schools around that area, and came across a school that was just completely in alignment with what I had been looking for. And I'd held off on going back to school because I didn't want to go to a school where I had to unlearn again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came across this school that talked about social justice and energetics and the elements, and like really did a deep dive into herbal medicine. It was like a super intensive 7-month program that was really like 2 years worth of work. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, this is perfect. And I can't believe it's in New Orleans, exactly where I want to go. And I scroll to the bottom of the page and I see that it says it's in Marshall, North Carolina. And I'm like, where the heck is North Carolina? Like, I know nothing about this place, but I didn't even care because it was so in alignment with what I had been looking for that I was like, I would move anywhere for this program.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I had to wait
So
like
aligned.
so aligned. And it's rare for me to release control like that in terms of my environment. Usually I'm like, I need to be super into the place that this thing is happening, or I don't want to do it. But it just felt
Right.
so aligned. I was open. And I'm so glad that I was, because I had to wait a few months to actually apply. It was a really intense application process. There were only 22 spots available. And I waited and I did all the things and I had my interview and I got into this program. And so I was like, all right, I'm moving to North Carolina. I don't know anything about this place, but I'm
From the
going to do
West
it.
Coast.
From the West Coast. Yeah,
I love it.
exactly.
It's so
And
great.
a couple months after I got into school, I was actually staying in New Orleans. And so we decided to drive down there for me to just get a glimpse into the environment. We were staying in Hendersonville, which is about half an hour outside of Asheville.
Love it.
And it was a really strenuous drive to get there, a drive that should have taken a few hours, ended up taking like 13 hours. I didn't know if I was going to make it.
Oh man.
Car problems, relationship problems, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And we finally get to Appalachia, and I step out of the car at like 2 a.m. in the morning, and this overwhelming sense of peace just falls over me. Something I had never felt before. And something in me was just like, this is where you're meant to be. And the way that that has manifested has just been unreal. Appalachia is absolutely my home now. And that school, it was a really amazing experience. It didn't end up being exactly what I hoped it was, but it really felt like it was the path for
It
me
was the
to
gateway for you to get to where you are now. I'm sorry, as you're talking,
exactly.
I'm like getting all this like, intuitive information and downloads, but
Yeah.
it's like sometimes it's not what we think it's going to be, but it gets us to the place where we are going, where we're supposed to go. So it's like
Yeah.
it got you into where you are, which is, it's such an incredible story.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I ended up in Appalachia, and the way that I have been able to dive into learning about true medicine
Mhm.
and connecting to raw nature and really just have found God, have found spirit, have found source in these mountains, in the community that I've developed there, in every single one of my experiences has just been absolutely unreal and almost hard to put into words.
Yeah, it's gosh, this is so aligned that you're on the podcast and this is the conversation that's being presented. Um, for the last 2 years, I've gotten some intuitive messages from God that I'm supposed to do something in the medical field. And so I had
Mm.
taken some classes. I have a bachelor's degree and I thought I wanted to be a counselor years ago. So I have some master's level coursework from Fordham in New York City. But
Mhm.
the vision that I was getting was actually working in the medical field, and so I was working towards getting my occupational therapy assistant, certification, and I took anatomy and physiology. I had like a 95 average. Like it just came so natural to me.
Yeah,
And I do, energy work and intuitive readings and healings for people. And all this physical stuff started coming through, which made me nervous, but these
right.
things, clients were like, how do you know that? I said, I can see it. I can see it in your field. And so then when it came time to go to the program, just like your tumultuous drive or whatever, it's like, I had so much resistance. Like all this stuff just did not line up. And so I figured, okay, I'm actually not meant to go into traditional medicine. And now I'm researching, naturopathic doctorate programs. And oh, I'm getting like chills just sharing with you. Like I didn't
Me
realize how
too.
parallel our paths are.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I've been researching different programs and I'm currently taking prerequisites. And the most amazing thing is the schools aren't here though, just like
They're
you.
not.
They're on the West Coast.
They're actually banned in this part of the country.
I know. And so I also feel this is such a perfect time. I have been holding this very close to my heart, but I'm going to share it here with you for the first time on the podcast that I feel like I'm meant to be part of the movement to bring it here. Yeah. So um, yeah, I don't know what that looks like, but I know that it's part of my
Yeah.
path. So,
Mhm.
yeah, just taking the steps necessary and yeah, because I know it's illegal. It's not recognized here. NDs are not
Yeah.
recognized here. But the most incredible thing
Right.
is all the school that I've done up until now, and I'm 37, I am 2 classes away from getting into a naturopathic doctorate program.
Wow.
It's
So
so crazy.
close.
I
Yeah.
know it's so aligned, but I love that, just looking at the body holistically instead of this pharmacology focused healing. The body's designed to heal itself, as you know, and have studied in your herbalism classes. And then
Yeah.
also that energy component too, like mind, body, soul connection. When one's off, another one's going to be off, and we have to incorporate
100%.
all the systems. So, wow, I can't believe I could share that
100%.
on the podcast because that's really
Oh,
big, and I like to hold my stuff, my sacred stuff, really close. But it's something
yeah.
that I think that the world is going to we're going to be needed. This is needed. So thank you for
100%.
sharing and giving
Yes.
me
Thank
the
you.
courage to share where I'm at, even though I have no idea what that's going to look like. I'm just
Right.
trusting God. If this is your will for me and this is what my life looks like, I know I'll get there. And so far, like the path to that has been pretty smooth. So we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm on
Yeah.
board with you. I keep thinking
Yeah.
about, when I'm ready to go to naturopathy school, I don't want to
Yeah.
have to leave where I'm at, but they
I
are
know.
all on the West Coast. And,
And
even in the
Canada.
in Canada, exactly. And, even in the naturopathic world, what really came to me in herbalism school was that we have to bridge this gap between the community herbalism space and the naturopathy space. Because when I was in California, I was very embodied in the world of naturopathy. I was working with a naturopathic doctor and studying naturopathy. And in the naturopathy space, there's even a push to bring more of these Western modalities or concepts into naturopathy in order for it to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
And it's the same with Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine in the States is actually quite watered down from what is taught and studied in China. And um, Chinese medicine doctors here are required to take certain classes and pass tests on Western practices, while Western doctors are not required to take any classes or tests on Chinese medicine or really any alternative modality, let alone even a
So
nutrition
wild to
course.
me.
Yeah. And so I found in herbalism school that people were so connected to the earth. They were foraging for their herbs. They had this deep connection to the ground and knew how to work with those things. But some of the modalities that I had learned were necessary for that higher level of healing were actually pushed away. And things like parasite cleanses and sauna detoxification and these kind of things that have been so helpful for people to move energy and move things in their body were pushed away largely because of the fact that those are associated with privilege. And it's
Yeah.
it's such a real thing. There's so much privilege in a lot of the health and wellness space that we've created in the world. And so during herbalism school, I decided that I really wanted to help bridge this gap between herbalism and naturopathy.
Yeah.
And when I was in school as well, I started to learn about alchemy and alchemical herbalism and started to study the laws of nature and realized that if we followed the laws of nature, our body could come back into alignment, our spirit could come back into alignment, and we could be whole. And so since that time, that's really what I've devoted so much of my path to, is realigning to the laws of nature, the true laws that our culture has pulled us out of. And I decided that I really wanted to learn how to embody those laws of nature into my medical practice and into my healing practice, and thought that if people had someone to support them in realigning to what nature really intended for us, to aligning to the ecosystem, developing the ecosystem of our body and understanding the ecosystem of our being, that we can make huge progress. And so that's really a major area that I want to bring into the naturopathic field.
I love it.
And yeah.
That's so awesome. I know you were just talking about like the laws of nature. Do you want to share like your what just for people that are listening that don't really know, maybe
Yeah.
to share what some of those are, like what that means.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think one great example to start with is the way that we work with time. Um, yeah, so, we've developed this culture of working throughout the year, working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, or sometimes even longer. Sometimes we work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And there's a reason that the sun goes down when it goes down. There's a reason that it's darker in winter. Winter is a time of hibernation. It's not
Yeah.
just the bears that are supposed to be hibernating. It's actually part of the natural rhythm of rest and rejuvenation for us to go into this deep resting state during winter time. And so there's a reason that we tend to be more tired in winter, that we tend to crave just sitting around in a cozy house, going to sleep earlier, but we push ourselves against this natural rhythm. And
So unnatural, that
a
aspect
hundred percent.
of the hustle bustle. And what's coming to me
Yeah,
too is just like the cycles. Like we're
exactly.
cyclical beings, especially
Mhm,
females. Like
mhm.
I have this whole I track my cycle. I've talked about it on the podcast, and I really believe in honoring the whole cycle. And
Yes,
it's like that time in our cycles when we're bleeding is our winter. And I
exactly.
literally don't, I try to schedule myself so I don't work on my first day of my bleed, because
Mhm.
it's something to be honored and revered. So
Right.
I'm with you on that, like the whole seasonal aspect of bringing more rest in during the winter and honoring like the light in the sky and the dark. Like I feel very in tune to those natural cycles as well. So I'm glad that you're mentioning that.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
read my mind. I was just going to bring up the menstruation
Oh
cycle
yeah.
and the 4 seasons that
Yeah.
people who bleed undergo. And that's another great example of how those of us who bleed are pushed to work through our entire cycle. But there's actually a summer that we have, which is ovulation, when our energy is so much higher. We
Mhm.
have a ton of capacity. It's a great time for fasting. We don't need as much. We have so much to go off of. And when we go into menstruation, that is our deep rest time. That is
Yeah.
our winter. That's when so many spiritual downloads come through that we need to have the space to receive and hold. And it's the same with winter.
Right.
And
Mhm.
there's so much that can come through to us when we rest, when we're in this deep state of rest that we're not allowed to have when we're working in this capitalistic society of
Yeah.
hustle and bustle, like you
When we're
said.
moving too
Go, go,
fast,
go.
we can't hear. And also
Yes.
I feel like it's just, it's a hustle and bustle and, just, oh God, there's so many tangents we could take in this conversation right now. Just about how like the public school system is outlined and like the demands of children going to school early as fuck in the morning and being there
So
all day,
early.
like their little brains and bodies, like they don't have the capacity for that. And then when they don't and they show natural incapacity to it, it's like, oh, what's wrong with your kid? Let's slap a diagnosis on the kid when it's, the child needs to be a child. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But this is all like part of that of the natural cycles being messed with. And that's also like we could go on a tangent about the galactic Mayan calendar and how that is broken down by the moon cycles, which is natural, as compared to like a Gregorian calendar system. And, our friend
100%.
Tammy has broken that down on the podcast before. But yeah,
Yeah.
I love that this is where God wanted our conversation to go today. Cause I really wasn't sure. I'm like, God, there's so much her and I can talk about. And I don't know what's going to come out, but I'm loving, loving this. Yeah.
Totally. Yes, me too. It's so aligned. And yeah, I think that's a major aspect of the laws of nature is understanding the seasons. And another one that I work really closely with is understanding the law of reciprocity and how that ties into community. And, I've mentioned a few times like the ecosystem of our body, and I see everything that we are a part of as an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're all just a part of this mycelial web of consciousness in reality. Everything is interconnected. Mycelium is community. And a lot of us have started to come deeper into community, but for me, so much of my life, I felt so isolated, so alone and far away from people who really understood me and was very much in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you want to hoard resources. You want to hoard
Yeah.
what it is that you think you're lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And the law of reciprocity says that when you share whatever it is you have, it inevitably comes back to you.
Yes.
And so this is what I feel like a major problem with our capitalistic patriarchal culture is that we're stuck in this survival mode where we feel like we need to hoard resources to be okay. We have people just billionaires who have so much money that could change the world, just hoarding onto it out of this
Right.
survival state, not understanding that they would be so much more fulfilled if they were actually sharing that with the ecosystem that they exist in. And what I've learned is that there's actually not very much that we need to buy when we are in a community that's sharing resources. The way that my community functions, I mean, almost anything that I hear people ask for is received from another community member in ways that it's just hard to try to plan them before. But when they know that you're also available to share whatever it is you have, which, resources are all kinds of things. It can just be time and space. It can be energy, holding space for someone to share what they're going through.
Yeah.
It can be things like, and is things like food and water. And I mean, I think this is where, the hurricane
Yeah.
comes in a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to share? Like, I know you said Appalachia, but like where your community is. And then I know that
Yeah.
you survived the hurricane. And if you want to talk about that experience, I was so worried about you and Tammy and my
Mm.
friends there. And that land is so special to me. I must have had a past life there because every time I
Yeah,
touch the earth there, I'm crying and
totally.
oh my God, my heart broke into a gazillion pieces. And I was checking on you and my friend Frank
Yeah,
and Tammy and just sending so much love because
yeah,
it was just unbelievable, but probably
yeah,
obviously more so for you. So if you want to share about like where the community is and that
yeah.
experience, you're welcome to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to share a little bit about it. I'm based in Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm actually part of a multitude of communities, but my core community in Asheville is just filled with really beautiful, loving people who have done a lot of work around their healing and really understand a lot of these laws of nature, like the laws of reciprocity and living in alignment with the cycles and finding joy in order to balance the grief that we all go through. And I really felt this so deeply after the hurricane. And I mean, I'll say that I feel so privileged in my experience. All of us lost water and power and internet, and that was inevitable for at least a couple weeks for all of us. Some of us lost a lot more. Entire towns were wiped away, entire houses were destroyed. I mean, it's just been the whole spectrum of the experience. But after the hurricane, we all lost power, we lost water, and we lost internet. And so we didn't have a way to communicate with people. And those of us who could find each other just ended up coming together. I walked over to my friend's house the day after the hurricane, not sure where to go, and three of our other friends were there, and we gathered and we planned how we were going to find water and how we were going to share it. We planned meals to cook together, thinking about the ingredients that we all had that we could bring together and make. And before the hurricane, my friend, she's from Florida, and so she's kind of used to the hurricane thing. And she had planned like a post-hurricane party. And
Man.
the internet went out and she didn't know that anyone was going to make it over. She didn't know where anyone was. And all of these people just intuitively knew to came over, and
Oh my God.
we gathered together and we got to share and we got to cry and hold each other. And then we all coordinated that the next night there was going to be a cookout at another friend's house that we were going to all go to, cook over the fire and just be together. And when we were there, there was some flooding in that house. And so a bunch of those friends went and worked on the area of that house that had been flooded. And when we would get little pockets of internet service, everyone just was checking on everyone. It was like, all right, who are our people? Who do we need to check on? We're going to verify that they are safe and okay. And we did whatever it is that we needed to make sure that our community was safe. And if anything was wrong, we gathered together to support them. And so about 3 days after the hurricane, my friend who I'm actually staying with here in Utah, I knew that her grandparents were out in Weaverville, an area that had been potentially really affected and flooded. And I had very little gas and I had no phone service, but I could kind of remember the way there. And
Oh,
so my friend who was in that community offered to go with me to check on them. They're elderly, and I knew their phone service already wasn't great. And so we got in the car and we drove out there, and I started to get lost. And after the hurricane, it felt like all of these walls between people just pulled apart because you had no option but to communicate with others in order to be okay. And
yeah.
so I got a little lost, and I saw that someone was outside their house and pulled over and just went over to talk to them and asked them for directions. And so we got into a whole conversation, checked in on their community and made sure that they were okay. Um, she gave me directions to help me find the way. I got lost again, pulled over again, met someone else who was checking on an elderly friend there. They helped me give directions, and it was someone who had lived in the community, nearly their entire life, like true Appalachian, and finally made my way to the area where her grandparents were and realized that the roads had been completely destroyed and they were being flooded, and I could not drive up to where their house was. And so I ended up having to park like at least a mile away, if not more. And my friend and I walked through this, like, it was so wild. It's really hard to put into words. I mean, the road was totally destroyed. There were pieces that were falling off. It was flooding, like thick water coming at you. There are a lot of toxins in the mud too. So like it's not super safe to be doing this, but we knew that we had to check on our people. And so we made this massive trek, like up the mountain to try to get to this house to make sure they were okay. And along the way, as we're doing that, we come across neighbors coming out to check on other people
Oh,
who at
wow.
some point let us know that they were like, who working on, and I told them, and they were like, they're doing okay, like they have this, they have this. And so it was just this mycelial web of communication and connection that completely opened when we didn't have our normal walls of jobs that we had to go to. I mean, no one could go to work, nothing was
Yeah.
open, there was
Right.
no internet. It really felt like a big blessing in that way to
Yeah.
have nothing else to do but to be in community. And yeah, I mean, just all the walls were just broken down. We didn't have all these obligations that in our mind were more important than community. And so we finally made our way to her grandparents and were able to check in on them, and they were doing good, but they had also been pretty isolated, and anyone who wanted to go check on them, they're used to seeing their family, had to make that at least mile trek through disaster in order to get to them. And we got there, and then we realized that they actually had a spring on their land, and so they were sharing water with their
Oh,
community.
wow.
Everything is just the way that it all flowed made sure that we took care of each other and we were okay. And in other cultures in back in the day, like this was so normal. It wasn't normal to go to the store for your individual ingredients that came from across the world to cook your individual meal. And, like things have changed so much, and we've stepped away from these laws of reciprocity that have inherently not only kept us alive and surviving, but thriving.
Yeah.
And it was such a weird feeling to feel this deep grief over what had happened to the land that I live on and the area that I was in, but also feel this deep blessing of coming back to community and being so deeply in community and truly embodying the law of reciprocity and the laws of nature, because we had no other option.
Wow. I mean, I am inspired by those stories, and it's like it's almost sad in a way that it takes big disasters sometimes for us to like actually connect and
Mm-hmm.
be there for each other. Like, why does it have to get to that point of disaster?
Right.
But I'm so grateful that you were able to experience like that which you were calling in for so long, like that type of lifestyle, and just experiencing that community. But what was coming to me when you were talking is like all those walls, like, yeah, job and this, and society says this and that, and hiding behind a phone. Well, now you can't do that. And
Right.
how do we actually find each other? We're using our intuition and our telepathy because we
Yep.
are spiritual beings, like having this human experience. And innate in us is that intuition and you utilizing that. And so
Right.
that's an amazing aspect of your story too, that shows that, you know, we are capable. Like we are beyond capable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We often refer to it as our third iPhone.
Yeah, okay.
This usually comes up in
That's
like
so
festival
funny.
situations when you
Okay.
don't,
You're
when
like,
you
wait,
don't
hold
have
on, where
service.
are you? Okay,
Yeah,
got it. You're over here.
100%
That's how
though,
it was when I lived in Costa Rica, where I met Tammy. I never had my
exactly.
phone. I never had a clock. What the fuck was time, honestly? Like
Yeah,
I would teach yoga at resorts and surf, and then I'd walk the beach and I would meet and see who I was supposed to see. I never knew the time. I barely cared about Facebook and this and that. I really didn't care. I just was so, and they worship the sunrise and the sunset.
yeah,
Like it is a
yeah,
thing. It's a thing. And so, but now, yeah,
right.
all these walls and technology and
Yeah,
there are some amazing aspects of that too. Like I'm not gonna say like,
100%.
I'm not against it. Like, look at right now, we're on Zoom, you're
Yeah,
in Utah and I'm in
right,
South Carolina. Like,
right.
what? Like that's incredible. But I also firmly, it's like this pool energy that's within me too, of like, I like, so we had the snowstorm here. We had snow
Yeah,
and like 5 inches, and everything shuts down here because we're not equipped. We don't have the equipment for the roads here. And I got to be
mhm,
honest, I loved it because it's forcing people to be quiet when we should be quiet. um
definitely.
there was some some silly things that happened, like with my vehicle, because I wanted to go see the snow, like out, yeah, on the sand, whatever. But
Yeah,
yeah, I honestly, when power goes out in a way and I can't be on my phone, like I can't, I like it because you have to disconnect from all that stuff to really actually connect. And I feel like,
100%.
right? So that is such a beautiful story. And I think when we were texting during that time, like when you had service, I think you had mentioned that your workplace had something happened with your workplace, and it's switched
Yeah.
now, right? You're doing something different, or
Well, I'm not doing something different. So I am the head of Plant Bar, which is an artisanal coffee, tea, and herbal elixir lounge that focuses on community education around plants. And it's inside of a cannabis dispensary. And we had just opened a new location in River Arts District, and it was really, really focused on artisanal coffee and tea. And a lot of tourists come into that area. And so we were getting the chance to really bring types of education to people who didn't normally have access to that. And we actually had planned our grand opening party to be the night of the hurricane. And we had heard a couple
oh my
days
gosh.
before that the hurricane was coming, and intuitively, I knew that something big was going to happen.
Yeah, I actually
And
was going to ask, because I was messaging with my really good friend Frank, who lives in Batcave.
mhm,
Hey, Frank, if you're listening. And he was like, honestly, Linz, because he's super intuitive too. You would love him.
yeah,
You would love him. He's great.
mm,
And he said, I don't think anyone's taking this seriously, and I feel it's going to be really bad. And I
yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, and so I was wondering if you had that similar experience, if people were just like, yeah, that's whatever, like, and people were unprepared. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's scary though, because it's almost like it's snow happening here. Like, what are the
right.
odds? Like,
What
it's
it
weird. It's not natural.
complete- completely. And yeah, it's really hard because a lot of times there are occurrences where people are like, oh, this is going to be really bad. This is going to be really big. And so people kind of freak out and panic, and then it doesn't end up happening. And so I
Mhm.
think they've gotten into this rhythm of like, we'll take it seriously when it happens. But I had had some friends that were sharing that they also thought that it was going to be really big. And so I
Oh,
definitely felt that
intuitively.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely felt that way. And not everyone did. And what's actually interesting is like, I knew that our building was going to completely flood, and other people did not. In the morning of the hurricane, my car was in the shop. And so I could not get over to the shop to pull everything that I needed to. So I was directing staff from the phone, but they were in such a rush to get things done that they didn't get my message of the most important things to move.
Oh,
And
man.
so it was out of my control.
Yeah.
And the owner of the building did not believe it was going to flood all the way to the top. He said it might flood a few feet, and our location was already a little higher, anyways. And so he felt like it would be fine, and it completely flooded. But what's really interesting is there is an antique shop in that little area owned by a woman who is the only person in all of River Arts District who knew to move all of her inventory out. And so she got all of her product out, and that whole area got flooded away and
So
disappeared.
she took it seriously and just said, you know what, I'm gonna take my
Yeah.
stuff out. And so it's so interesting too with all the different messaging that people receive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. And I thought it was no coincidence that it was a woman who intuitively knew that something was going to happen. And so she took action on it.
mhm.
And that area is filled with so much local art. It's an artist's haven, and a lot
Yeah.
of people come to see the local art. And I mean, I can't even count how many pieces of local art were destroyed. People's life work just
Yeah.
washed away,
Hmm.
and I think there's so much in that. There's so much grief, and also so many spiritual lessons of what do we do
And
when we lose
attachment and
everything, attachment,
yes,
and
what's
uh,
important. And then
yeah,
the rebuilding phase. So now you're still part of Plant Bar, which is amazing. So
yes.
awesome stuff that you're doing that. But thank you for sharing about that
Mhm.
because I've talked with some people, but I didn't get to hear like your experience with it. And so I'm grateful. There are some other people that have reached out that want to come on and talk more about it. So
Yeah.
I guess the different conspiracies and whatever else is out there. And I wasn't physically there, so I don't know. And I don't know if you want to share anything about that if or whatever, but you can.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess, the only thing I want to share in that regard is I learned a lot about the effects of social media and the manipulation of information by people who thought they were actually caring for us and speaking. Um, well, let me just give an example.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna
once
say,
we
can you elaborate?
Yeah, let me just give
Yeah.
an example. So, I've been in the social media world for a while. I follow a lot of social justice accounts and people talking about social justice and social awareness and caring for people who are less privileged. And during the hurricane, when we finally got service, I saw all of these people who thought they were well-intentioned sharing memes or posts about what was happening in Appalachia that weren't even necessarily true. And I saw them using our experience to make a point about something else, essentially objectifying our experience to really try to say something egotistical about how much they cared about people having difficult circumstances, but it didn't feel that way at all. So something I saw was that people in Appalachia are just went through a hurricane and are not getting any help from the government, and meanwhile the US government is sending all this money to fund this war in Gaza. And I was like, that's absolutely true that the government is doing that, but what do we have to do with that? And how is that helping us? You're making a point to show that you're against the war and you're against what's happening here, but you're not actually doing anything to support us. So it doesn't feel like it's actually rooted in the heart and in your care. It feels like it's rooted in ego. And I mean, there were a multitude of memes that I saw about the lack of care for the earth and why this hurricane had happened in Appalachia. And I'm like, yeah, we don't care about the earth enough, but also you're using us to make a point and you're not doing anything to support our circumstances. And so it was really interesting to see the world's outside perspective of what was happening to us and
Yeah.
to realize that they actually didn't know at all what was happening, but
Yeah.
they were being fed information online from sources, probably not from Appalachia, about what was happening. And so they were making these statements about what was happening, not realizing that half of it wasn't actually true or realistic to the experiences that we were having.
Yeah. I mean, I did hear from friends there that it was that like some of the things weren't really happening, or some of the like GoFundMe's and this and that weren't actually going towards people.
Yeah.
I know that our community here organized a hurricane benefit, and we did like an auction and raised all this money. And I know that the money went towards the efforts, but people in Appalachia were telling me to make sure, like, if you're donating, like, where is it going? Like, make sure you know where it's going. And so that was really
Yeah.
important to me through the process. And it's like when events happen here and the news and the media blows it out of proportion, and people are like, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'm okay. But I mean, yeah, I mean, just all the stuff that was floating around the internet, like the photos and some of the stories, it was like, well, also with AI now, what was real, and what was not, only you
Mhm.
living through that know what that experience was like. But I hear what
Yeah.
you're saying, to kind of use someone else's pain and suffering to like get on this soapbox of whatever the fuck
Mhm.
you feel like you want to talk about. And
Yeah.
you're not even helping anyway. So it's like, kind of like where, I don't want to say like you don't have the right to say it, because I believe in freedom of speech and all this, but it's like
Right.
where, yeah, just like you said, you're coming from your ego, you're not coming from your heart. So, and I think that we're in this 2025, we're in this Pluto Aquarius age of we're just going to start seeing a lot of veils coming down, and
Yeah.
truths being exposed. And where do you want to direct your energy, and what do you stand for? Like, what's your heart about? Like, what are your values? And so, yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I mean, on that note, a lot of people did really want to support, and we haven't been given ways to hold grief of others, and we haven't been shown ways to really learn to be of service to people who are in need. And so there was so many movements of people from outside Asheville wanting to drive down to drop off food and clothing. And the thing is, we were actually overwhelmed with those kind of donations.
Yeah.
We didn't know where to take them, where to send them. I actually still have donation items that I need to find a place for where they're actually going to be used. And so, and then even within that, we were overwhelmed with things like junk food that wasn't actually nourishing our bodies. You could go to these donation centers and, get an endless supply of granola bars or like processed foods, but it was hard to find places to get
Like
fresh.
produce.
produce and food that was really nourishing. And there were a lot of people, even within that, there were so many people making meals for others, but you had to be able to drive to the place to pick up the food. So if you don't have access to a car, if you don't have access to gas, which a lot of us were struggling with for at least a
Yeah.
couple weeks,
Yeah.
you couldn't actually get to that place to get these fresh meals. And so yeah, it's, there's just so much within really learning to communicate with people who are needing something and
And
ask, like,
listening to
what
the
is it?
needs and not
Yeah,
an
what is it?
assumption.
Precisely. And, to me, this comes back to the concept of white saviorism of I see these people who are less privileged than me. I'm going to do what I think is necessary to help them rather than I'm going to be in conversation with these people and see if I can even support, and if so,
And
how I
how,
can support them.
not just like, yeah, I did read, of course, because I'm here, I wasn't there. I read and heard from others that were there that there was an overwhelming amount of donations, and it's like, what do we even do with all this stuff? Because it's
Yeah.
not exactly what we need. So
Right.
yeah, I think that is really important. And yeah, I think it kind of goes back to, I don't know why this is coming to me, but like, I don't know, back in the day, I guess there was like what, yellow journalism. And I feel like we're back there again, where it's like everything is inflated and what's real and what's not. And we really need to get back at, like, individually, right, into our like God consciousness, like that intuition that we were talking about without the walls and the distractions. Like, we're going to need that. We need that. And so, yeah, even just
Yeah.
with all, because there's so much information constantly.
Constantly. It's overwhelming.
That is overwhelming. But
Yeah.
well, we have been chatting for like an hour, and I feel like,
At
I know I
least.
said, God, we could talk forever and ever and ever. But before I close out this podcast episode, I want to ask you if there's anything else that you're feeling called to share before we close out.
I mean, yeah, I feel like if I answer that question, we'll go on another tangent.
You can, if you can do it in like
A couple minutes. Yeah, I think, what I really want to come back to is the reason that I brought up the laws of nature and bringing the laws of nature into medicine and really embodying the laws of nature is because I feel that when I embody the laws of nature, I am completely connected to God. And
yeah.
spirit is fully allowed to move through me and communicate to me, and I'm able to be open. And when I'm not living in alignment with the laws of nature, there are these walls and these veils around spirit and source that I have to work extra hard to break away from. And so that's something that I really want to support in bringing to the world, is just helping people understand nature and this essence better. And within that, even, I see nature as everything, even the culture and environments that we've created in this modern world, the big buildings and the trucks, and all of this is part of nature. I see the nature of the forests and the ocean and the soil as raw nature, and I see our environments, our cities and our businesses as process nature. But inherently, it's all nature, and spirit is embodied in all of them. And if we can find a way to do our best to embody and integrate these laws of nature into our daily lives, we're better off. And it's never about perfection. I don't believe in the concept of going back to how it was before. It's never been
No, everything
perfect.
is evolutionary. That is
Exactly.
nature, is the evolution of things. So I'm with you on that.
Exactly.
I don't believe in going backwards either.
Yeah. we can really only go forward. But if we can remember the past, be in our present, and feel into the future, we have so much potential.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Well, I'm grateful. It's good to see you
Mm, so great to
and
see you. This has been
chat.
amazing.
Amazing conversation. You're always welcome to come back on the podcast
I would
whenever.
love that.
And if people want to check out like Plant Bar, or if you want to give your information, if people want to connect with you, like what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very active on Instagram. So my Instagram is Nikki, Nikki dot Eldred, Eldred. And my business is Medicine from Mother. I'm actually working on developing a new website for that, so that should be up soon. And then my company Plant Bar is at Hey Plant Bar. And then the website is visitplantbar.com. And we have a location in Asheville and a location in Chattanooga. And within Asheville, I also do personal consultation work around natural medicine and cannabis and endocannabinoid healing. And I also provide a personal tea service and tea lessons as well for learning about Gong Fu Cha, the mindful art of Chinese tea.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'm wishing
Thank
you
you.
a beautiful rest of your time in Utah and safe travels back to the East Coast when you do that. And
Thank
I'm going
you.
to say thank you to everyone for listening or
Yes.
watching. And I hope you all have a beautiful week. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lindsay. This has been the best.